So hey guys, Jonathan Graham here for Guitar Interactive Magazine, and we are sitting here with Jim Root from Slipknot. How are you today?
Good. I'm
It's
just trying to process all the blue.
There's a lot of blue in here.
It's pretty blue.
Sure. I was sort of thinking we can use it as a mood ring. As the
Yeah,
interview goes on, it might change colour, you know, and be a happier space. But so you guys, you're back at the O2 once again. You're playing the debut album. Now, revisiting these tracks,
Yeah.
it's got to be hard to believe it's 25 years.
It's kind of is. I mean, so much can happen in that amount of time, yet it feels like a sort of a blink of an eye. You know what I mean? It's weird. Time is funny like that, right? But yeah, here we are at the O2 again, and I'm kind of liking this set because it's, I mean, we have some of these songs, we haven't played literally in 20 plus years.
Of course.
So it's kind of fun playing some songs and realizing, oh wow, like, as your catalog grows and you sort of wean some of the songs that you used to play. I mean, when we first started playing, it's all we had to play.
Of course.
So we had to play every song that was on the record because that's it. That's all we had. Now you have so much other stuff. You weed out all this other stuff, and then you realize when you revisit stuff years, or in our case, a decade or so later, it's like, wow, that was a crowd favorite. Like, that was a really good song to play live. And, you kind of forget about that because you put other songs in there. And then, some songs that you think are really great on the album or great to listen to don't turn out to be great songs to play live because maybe it's a little, it's too many time changes or too many parts or whatever, things like that, or it's too fast, like that sort of thing. Like, what were we playing? It starts with an M. It's off the Iowa record. Total brain fart right now.
Yeah, but well, this will help with our engagement because it'll be all in the comments.
Yeah, it's all blue.
Right.
Yeah, everybody will bring it. But I mean, if I can think of the name, it'll probably pop into my head later on while we're talking. But that was an example of one that we really loved to play, but didn't. Say it again? Yeah, that's it. I kept wanting to say Metanoia for some reason, but that was like a different idea or different song that, whatever, Metabolic. So Metabolic anyways.
Of course.
It's all this blue.
But another thing that's got to be a real, like deja vu for you is how intense some of these younger crowds have been that's coming in to see these shows. Seeing some clips from the tour, just all of a sudden feels like there's a whole new generation that are coming in to see Slipknot for the first time. People put their phones away, jumping around, getting crazy. Are you feeling that from the stage?
Yeah, a little bit. It's good to see. I mean, at the end of the day, this is, I mean, for young people that have all this energy, metal music is an outlet. You know what I mean? It's at least it was for me and my friend group when we were growing up. Like, you have all this extra energy and pent-up aggression and just feelings, and you don't know what to do with them. Well, metal music and metal shows, and I mean, it could work for any shows, but metal shows in particular are pretty aggressive, and you can go and, you can get into a pit and you can like work all that out, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And it's therapeutic in a lot of ways. And it's good to see that still rings true this many years later, and it can be an outlet for people. But having said that, I've noticed, I've looked up into the crowd, and I've seen like people with their phones, and they're facing themselves, and they're like in the middle of the pit, and I'm like, they're probably doing an Instagram live right now. And it's like, it reminds me of the Chappelle thing where it's like, he's talking about dreams, and like I'm in that guy's dream at that moment, instead of him being in mine type of thing.
That's it. You could make it a nightmare for them.
Could, yeah.
So obviously revisiting a lot of these tracks, you want to get the tones right as well. We know that about you, Jim. You're a big gearhead, and you love making sure that things are very accurate.
It's a battle.
Well, to talk us through the battle, like what point did you decide it had to be the authentic sounds?
I used to be the guy that would build a new rack every time we did a record based on what I would use in the studio. That gets very expensive over time,
Sure.
And it's time consuming, and if you're using like, I would always used to use like a 100-watt head with a backup head. So you got two heads, and then I went to the GCX or whatever type of switching systems. And then you got your MIDI switcher and your custom wah, and it takes up a lot of space. As you know, touring is getting more and more expensive, and we're trying to go from 800 million trucks to like 5. So, we're downsizing the rigs, and it's really hard to do that. I mean, I've used all this like digital processing stuff before, and it has a place, and it has a really valid usefulness. And I can't seem to find anything yet that beats the Quad Cortex with a particular IR of a Bogner amp that I've been using lately, which it's blowing my mind. And I know I was always a guy who was like, analog, I'll never use nothing but a tube amp, whether it's a Bogner or a Head First or an Orange or whatever it is, it's like, you just can't beat it. And you really can't until I got this Quad Cortex, and I'm still trying to beat it. I'm not going to give up yet, but it has been a really solid tool for, us trying to figure out how to downsize, to make touring work, to make it more cost effective, to, so to speak, decrease our footprint sort of thing, you know what I mean? And that whole thing. And I mean, I got one at home by my recording setup. I've got one in the jam room that I use. It's kind of working really well. So
you never had any problems with it, like the feel of it, because obviously the sounds are pretty indistinguishable, but sometimes that response, especially when you've played so many different types of venues and shows.
Yeah, that's the trick, isn't it? By the time it hits me, so I don't use in-ear monitors. I'm still using wedges on the floor.
Yeah.
So by the time it hits my ear, it's gone through a cab sim. It's gone through whatever board. I think we're using Pro Tools like Avid boards now for monitoring in front of house. Maybe they're Midas's. I can't remember. I haven't been over there to look for a while. But by the time it comes out and I hear it, it's gone through an EQ or a few compressors and all that stuff. So even if it was a head, like Bogner Helios head that the IR is based off of, it's going to get processed so much before I even hear it.
Sure.
And then you add that to 8 other guys hitting things, and Mick playing his guitar, and V-Man on his bass, and Eloy playing the drums, and there's so much going on in the mix. Like any of that nuance and that feel, it kind of goes away. You know what I mean? Because you're listening to everything and sort of in context with everything else. So it feels about as natural as it could feel once it comes through those wedges. You know what I mean? And then if I go back and I'm hanging out with Brad, he's got like a wedge set up sideways that also is running the signal of that out. So we can turn the volume down really low, and I can just like warm up or practice or play there. And it sounds like, when I'm at home, what do I do at home? I'm not plugging into a 412 when I'm sitting on my couch watching TV. I've got like a, a little Roland solid state or digital amp, digital processing amp. And then I'm running scales and warming up and playing along to commercials and stuff like that. So it's very similar to that sort of vibe. So that's how I kind of like, I wouldn't say justify it, but that's how I compare it in my mind. It's like, oh, this is like sitting at home on the couch watching TV and playing.
And it's something else to get used to it. I mean, the different scenarios, and then you just get used to it, and then that's your reality. What about guitar-wise? What you got out with you on the road?
Oh, man. I got a lot of Charvels and Jacksons and Fenders. I mean, there's like, and a lot of them are ones that I've just like picked up like off, like Reverb, or bought from like the Music Zoo or Diablo Guitars or someplace like that.
So you're the guy always outbidding me, yeah? On these
maybe.
okay.
I don't even, fuck bidding. I just buy it now. I went down this wormhole of it started with trying to find the Model 5s like I had in the late 80s. So I think I have like 7 or 8 of those now. Because I just, I lost that guitar. I don't know how. I mean, I traded it for something because that's what I used to have to do is trade. I never had enough money to just buy something outright. So, and I don't know whatever happened to that guitar, but it stands out as being one of the favorite guitars that I had, like as a teenager, or somebody in my early 20s or whatever.
Sure.
So I went down that wormhole and I got those, and then I started like really realizing how much I missed like the DK series Jacksons, the bolt-on neck ones, and not the neck-through ones. So I have a few of those, and I had them custom build me one. Metal Joe Williams made me a really nice white one that I've got out. And then, of course, like the Sandema style Charvels. But when I compare those to like my Strat and my Tele, you know what I mean? There's so many different tools, and I love this, and then I'll grab another one. I'm like, oh, I love this, and it's like,
of course,
it's a disease.
And these days, of course, growing up, the idea of something come from the 90s or the 80s and being a vintage guitar, that you would have laughed at that. It is
now, yeah.
Of course, it is now, and that's that version of that. The difference between a vintage instrument and obviously the custom shop stuff is fantastic, but what for you is that difference that will make you think, no, actually, I think I'm going to record this with the older instrument?
It depends on the wood, really. I mean, there was a period of time where they were using like tree farm wood, I think, to build. And they probably still are, I'm sure. But if you get like a lot of the guitars from the 80s and 90s and previous to that, even if they're a cheaper model guitar, it's still made with old growth wood. So, you know, I'll find old guitars like that might have been a $200 guitar when it was born.
Yeah.
And then you just rip the pickups out of it and change the hardware and refret it if you need to, and you have, you know,
it's got that
a guitar that's
resonance,
a guitar that's made out of wood that could be 300 years old instead of one that was like, you know, grown in the last 20 or 30 years or whatever, you know. And I think there's a difference in the tightness of the grain and the porousness of the wood in that sense, you know.
You can sometimes see it on the back and all that as well, can't you, with some of them? You ever been tempted to pick up
And
one?
it's crazy if you find an old piece of mahogany that's really light. You know what I mean? It's like, did this thing fall into a river and get full of ice holes, and then all of a sudden it has millions of little tone chambers, like Stradivarius violin, sort of like, you know, philosophy, or is it just the way that tree grew in the soil that it was in at that time? You know, it's bananas. And I don't subscribe to that whole, no matter what you put EMGs in, it's going to make everything sound the same. I mean, the first time we recorded a record, I proved that wrong. It's like, you know, if you've got 5 different guitars and they all have the same EMGs in it, they're going to sound 5 different ways. I mean, I've even taken the same pickups out of one guitar and put them in a different guitar, and it's completely different. You know, so it's all about the wood and the approach to your playing, and, you know, bone density and skin texture and all that stuff. I think that all has a lot to do with it, you know.
And even if it only makes a small percentage, that could be the difference between writing something great and it being...
It absolutely could. And I've used a number of my guitars. Mainly I use the Jazzmasters, Strats, and Tellys when we record. I haven't really had a chance to use the Charvels yet. We haven't really been in a studio situation since they were released. But that the original number one Telly, for some reason, even with my new pickups that we threw in it, I was on the fence. I wanted to keep it all original, and so we left the 81 and 60 that it was born with in there. And I'm like, fuck it, let's just put the demoniums in there and see what it does. And it still has every frequency that a producer, like if I have 6 different guitars in the studio, and then we're chugging and listening to, you know, we get to the point where the amps we know we're using these amps, let's figure out the guitar. And then we get to the guitars, and it's always that guitar. It just has it seems like it hits every frequency in the range. You know what I mean? It's chimey. It's got tight low end. It's got the good mid ranges, and it's, you know. And then I pick up another guitar, and it'll just sound like there's a blanket over the speaker, or it's way too bright, or it's, you know, way too stratty sounding or something. You know. For whatever reason, that piece of wood is pretty magical.
It's your voice, basically, coming through it. You know, for sure. Just obviously, you know, we're all here because 25th anniversary of the debut album, you're playing it, as I mentioned before. But just talking a little bit, because I know you're a guy always, you know, you're always looking ahead and looking back to the past, and stuff is like, you know, there's too many good things happening. But we have got to touch a little bit on that period. Stepping into the band, that first audition, I mean, what are some of your memories of it? It feels like it would be an intense, intimidating place to step in for the first audition with Slipknot.
It was weird. It wasn't really an audition, because I had played with, Des Moines, it was a microcosm of like a larger music scene, but it was a big music scene. There were a lot of bands, a lot of different bands in such a small community that were doing so much stuff. So in one way or another, I had played with everybody that was in Slipknot.
Of course.
You know, we'd put on our own shows. We'd do all ages shows on the weekends in bars and try to get wristbands for people that wanted to drink, that were 21 or over, and all that. We'd rent out like United Workers halls and things like that, and sell merch and do all that business. So, you know, played with Heads on the Wall, which was Clown's band at the time. I played with, you know, Vex and all these other like local bands that like Paul was in, or Motifidius, which Joey was in, and you know, so we knew each other already. When I finally decided that I knew they were looking for a guitar player, and I'd been reached out to for them a couple of times, and you know, everybody probably knows the story. I said no a couple of times before I finally said yeah. When I finally went over to meet with Clown and listened to what they had been recording, I was just like, man, I don't know, man, it's going to be weird. I'm going to have to get on a tour bus with, like, I don't know any of you guys, and it's like, you know, I'm an only child, and, you know what I mean, I'm pretty set in my ways and all that stuff. And he was like, dude, we've all been playing together for, like, we've all opened for your band, and da-da-da-da-da, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess I kind of do know all you guys already, so. The most intimidating thing about it was that was a Sunday that I went in to talk to Clown. The next Monday morning, I went into work. At the time, I was screen printing T-shirts at a place called T-Shirt Graphics. Ed Veek was my boss, and I went up to him and I was like, hey, I just joined this band Slipknot that has a record deal. I'm going to be rehearsing with them every day because next weekend I'm getting in a car with Mick and going to Malibu to record 3 or 4 songs from the record. So I need to practice and learn their songs and do all that stuff. And that was the hardest part. It was like I couldn't even give my boss 2 weeks notice.
Wow.
I literally just walked in and was like, sorry, dude, got to go. You know what I mean? And then they were rehearsing at Sid's house. So I went over to Mick's house, I think that Monday night, and he literally just started showing me all the riffs off of it. And it's like, oh man, this is like a little bit overwhelming. It's a lot to learn in a very short amount of time, you know, but that's what I was there to do. And I tackled it. And the first rehearsal, I remember, you know, we're all packed in Sid's little basement and his parents are upstairs and it's loud as fuck in there because we're all on top of each other and you know, and it just felt natural. It felt there was an electricity in that room that is so hard to describe because it's like doing something you've never ever done before, yet it feels so familiar, and there's such a like rush of adrenaline that's happening. Like, you know, I was trying out different guitars at the time, and Mick was working at Yale Guitar Shop at that time, so I think I had like some Schecter or something, and we were trying to find like the right guitar because I had these ESPs and I didn't have any money. I didn't even have my own guitar yet.
Of course, yeah.
You know, I mean, I'd given up. You know what I mean? I'd been like, I was borrowing a Les Paul Studio from a friend of mine at that time. You know, so ended up with this Jackson, and I'm like, yeah, there it is. Missed those guitars, love those guitars, but just the intensity in that room, like playing songs like Surfacing for the first time and learning them, and then like stopping in the middle of the song and like, you know, like Joey would point at me and he'd be like, that's your part. And I'm like, fuck, I forgot to play that part. You know what I mean? Shit like that. And I'm just like, all right, cool. And then we just start from the beginning again. You know what I mean? And it was that work ethic. It was that diligent nose to the grindstone. You know, we're going to take over. We have to take over. It's this or nothing, you know, mentality. And that's, you know, in a lot of ways, that's still with us.
Was there a feeling that it was going to be as big as it was?
No, I mean, I think the first guy that really, like, had the notion that it was going to blow up was Joe. You know, I remember we played, like, our first show at Ozfest, and he was, like, really pissed about the monitors and just, like, the show. And all. And it's Ozfest. It's throw and go. I mean, you've got no time to do anything. We didn't have a sound guy. We didn't have anything. We had our friends helping tech us, and, you know, we were teching ourselves, and you know, so we pulled over to a hotel, and, you know, at the time we were all, you know, you get one room and everybody showers in it and all that. You sleep on the bus, making our $20 a day per diem, and that's, you know, that's how we were living. And, you know, Joe was just he was like, look, man, this band's going to blow up. It's going to be bigger than a lot of you think it's going to be, so we need to get our shit together. You know what I mean? And he was, in a lot of the ways, he was, like, really fucking intense with that sort of, like, it's got to be fucking this way mentality, you know, which I kind of learned a lot from that because I'm a little bit lackadaisical when it comes to that. It's like, good enough. Good enough isn't good enough. You know what I mean? It's like the Yngwie Malmsteen, less is more, no, more is more. You know what I mean? That whole thing. It's like, it's valid, man. If you want something, you got to fucking work for it. And when you get a record deal, that's when the work begins.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? That's when, you know, after you play your first show, that's when the work begins. After you put out your second record, that's when the work begins. The work never ends.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
It doesn't get any easier.
You know? Stepping into the second record, like what did that experience bring to the table where you're going in the studio and it's like, right, we've got to follow this. We're all doing this together. The energy's got to be different. You've got to live up to the expectation.
Yeah,
then.
I just remember the energy being, fuck this sophomore, like, you know, they always talk about a sophomore slump and all that shit, and we were like, we don't care about that. Let's just write the heaviest fucking record we've ever written. And, you know, we were rehearsing, like, riffs at sound check. You know, I remember being in, like, Wolverhampton and, like, playing People Equal Shit riffs, and, you know what I mean? Like, before it was People Equal Shit, you know, and, you know, that whole thing. And, you know, and then all of a sudden, you know, Ross is in Des Moines, and we're, like, doing like pre-production and putting all this stuff together to make this record, and we weren't thinking about anything but just making it as heavy as we possibly could.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then, you know, coming off the first tour, it's like we finished up Tattoo the Earth, and, you know, I hadn't been home for a month and a half, and I'd finally get home, well, to my roommate's house where I was living in the basement of, you know, and I'm hanging out with my girlfriend at the time, and Paul calls me, like, literally, like, the evening of the day that we got home, and he's like, come on, we're going over to Tony's house, his brother's house. We've got, like, Line 6 amps and a V drum set. We got to start writing. I'm like, what do you mean start writing? We literally just got home, like, yesterday or today or this fucking morning, you know. And he's like, we got to write, dude. We got to put another album out. Like, we're done touring, so we got to, you know, we got to get into it. We have all these riffs, the stuff we've been practicing while we're out on tour. You know, it's got to be an album. So meet me and Joey at my brother Tony's house, and that's how it went. You know what I mean?
You know, mentioning there like some of the rehearsal stuff, and you guys, you know, even in sound checks, just coming up with riffs. A lot of that footage has managed to make its way onto the internet in recent years. You know, with you guys no masks on, just you know, street clothes and what have you. You know, these days that anonymity that you had, you know, would be almost impossible. Obviously, Sleep Token are kind of trying to do a little bit of that just now. But you know, how important do you think that was to the success, or would it not matter now?
I don't know if it matters really. You know what I mean? I mean, we're talking about what we're going to do for the next album, and you know, and wardrobe and that sort of vibe. You know, you're gonna
do a Kiss, aren't you? It's all off.
I don't know, man. I always thought it'd be cool to go out on like a Halloween, just in regular, just like this. Yeah. You know, just on Halloween night, if we had a gig somewhere, it's like just the opposite of wearing the mask and the coveralls and all that. But that might signify kind of like the end to me if we did something like that. You know, it'd be fun. You know, I'd like to think. I was thinking about it. Like I think last night I was thinking about it. I was like, I wonder if I would act differently on stage without, you know, a mask and coveralls on, playing the same songs in front of the same crowd. You know, like take the Birmingham show that we just played a couple days ago. Like, how would I be differently on stage if I was just to go out, like, if I was in, you know, like when I was in Stone Sour or Death Runner or any of these other bands, like, would I still, like, lean on the monitor, wedges the same way? Would I still, like, bang my head the same way? I guess, I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever find that out.
Well, it's a question worth investigating. Yeah. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting, because even a rehearsal at a venue there's no way to compare that, you know. There's just you're playing the same songs, but it's a rehearsal. There's not like a crowd freaking out in front of you and feeding off of that energy and all that stuff. And the mains aren't on, and it's just you know, there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle that are missing. So yeah, it's weird. It's a weird one.
You guys working on new music?
Not like diligently. We've been touring so much since Eloy joined the band that my inspiration is like nearly zero. And there's a bunch of music that was written during COVID that I'm not interested in. You know what I mean? And I think everybody else in the band gets it too. And I think they're kind of like, okay, we need to just kind of like maybe sweep all that shit under a rug and start fresh. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I want to get touring behind us. I want to have like at least a month off just to like shut my brain off and, you know, sleep and all that kind of stuff. And then, you know, when I find myself like going out to my little home studio and putting riffs together, then I'll know it's time to start.
Time to do it for sure. Yeah. One thing you will have coming out though, of course, is the 25th anniversary re-release of the debut record, of course. What can you tell us about that?
I just saw a big email about that, and I only skimmed it. So I like, because there's so much, you know what I mean? There's vinyl, and there's different covers, and there's like everything that you could throw at it. I'm just like, whoa, wow, okay, well, wow, that looks cool.
Oh, they've got that in there too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I'm like, you know what I didn't bring my phone in here with me, but otherwise I'd show it to you and we could talk about it. But it's going to be really cool, because I was kind of like, ooh, I kind of want that. I would take that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, no, it makes perfect. Well, you know, the guys will be hearing all about it when it drops for sure. Now, I mentioned earlier, obviously, there's a whole new younger crowd that's coming in with all, you know, old guys like me who were there from the start. One of them in particular is actually one of the staff at GI. Their son has got the first gig tonight.
Oh, really?
15-year-old Marley, right? He's going to be in there and amongst the crowd.
Cool.
What would be your advice for a 15-year-old first showing at Slipknot?
Man, I don't know. I'm trying to think of what I would tell the 15-year-old me the first time I went to a show by myself. I think I was 14 when I did that, though. It's just going to be, there's going to be so much going on in your mind. It's going to be information overload. Mm-hmm. Not just from the show, but from the crowd itself. you know, and the vendors and the just walking up to a venue. The whole thing is such an experience. You know, like I don't know how it is in Europe, but in America, it was like tailgating outside the venue and seeing the tour buses and knowing that there they are. You know what I mean? Like there's such a huge excitement around it. And at that time, you didn't have whatever celebrity at your fingertips that you could check their Instagram and see what they had for breakfast. It was like if you didn't have a magazine or they weren't showing that on MTV, you had no access to them at all. And I remember being at Vets Auditorium, and Megadeth was opening up for Alice Cooper. And I saw Dave Mustaine on a skateboard, like, out by the buses, and I shit myself, you know what I mean? I was like, this is insane. You know what I mean? Like, there he is. He's real. You know what I mean? Because it's like, I've seen him in magazines. I've seen him on videos on MTV, and other than that, that was it. You know what I mean? So in some ways, I guess that maybe made things larger than life to me at that time. But these are things that maybe the younger generation, what was his name that's coming? Marley. Like, he's probably not going to be able to, like, relate to that. You know what I mean? Because if he wants to see what I'm playing guitar-wise, he can just look at my Instagram. Oh, these are going to be the guitars he's going to play tonight. Maybe not in the same order, but there they are. Yeah. When I saw Dave Mustaine come out on stage, and he had, like, this fucking Jackson King V, and it was so shiny and bright, like the tech just cleaned it and the lights were shining off of it. I was just like, holy shit, a King V, you know what I mean? It was like, this is crazy, you know? Information overload, man, because the crowd, you know, you're going to have the characters in the crowd, you're going to have the old school Slipknot fans, the younger Slipknot fans, you know, like I said, the vendors and everything else, and then the show happens, and there's a lot to take in. So I would say to Marley, just try to absorb it all.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Well, that's going to be his Dave Mustaine moment as soon as he sees this, that's for sure. So, look, there's been all these crazy biopics and what have you that have been made, and I don't think you could ever get one for Slipknot, because it would need to be NC-17, and then that would, you know, no one wants to put money behind that, do they? But they would for Slipknot, I'm sure. But what if you did have one of those films and the end credits are rolling? What track plays?
Oh, shit. Till We Die, probably. Just like the end of the show. Certain shows, not this show, because it's 25th anniversary, but, you know, any like normal show, we usually play Till We Die, because I think it'll end up being that way.
Perfect. Well, I don't think we could end on a better note than that. Look, Jim, absolute pleasure to chat with you once
Cheers,
again.
man. Thank you.
See you tonight.